Hello, I'm Professor Alistair Payne. I'm the head of the School of Fine Art at Glasgow School of Art. We have three particular disciplines within the BA Fine Art programme. One of those sculpture and environmental art, another is fine art photography, and the final one is painting and printmaking.
My name is Professor Paul Chapman and I'm the head of the School of Simulation and Visualisation. So here at SimVis we specialise in computer graphics and audio, and we do academic work, we do research and we do commercial work. And in September 2018 we'll be starting our first undergraduate courses in games programming and virtual reality, and also in sound for the moving image.
So my name is Sally Stewart and I'm the head of the Mackintosh School of Architecture, and I'm also a reader in architectural education and practice. We also have specialist master programmes that deal with specialisms such as urban design, urban building and digital creativity. And we also have PhD students.
I'm Barbara Ridley. I'm the head of the School of Design at Glasgow School of Art. My core value is to ensure that students who graduate from the Glasgow School of Art, whether they're undergraduate students, postgraduate students or PhD students, is that they have an excellent student experience.
My name is Dr. Gordon Hush. I am the head of the Innovation School at Glasgow School of Art. So we have students who are studying product design, design innovation, citizenship, service design, interaction design, both in Glasgow and at our Highlands campus in Forres.
My name is Ken Neal. I'm Deputy Director Academic at the Glasgow School of Art. My role is to help the 5 schools shape their strategies for learning and teaching and for research and enterprise.
The studio practices that we're dealing with are they're not rehearsals for life in the outside world. They're actually just the practice itself. Some of them are about the way we talk to each other and how we come together. Some of them are about the things that we make to be able to have those conversations. And some of them are also about how we make judgments about the work that's ongoing and how we change our work and how we move our work forward. And in some ways that the business of behaviours cuts right across any of our disciplines.
I like to think of the studio as being a sort of multiple type of space. So where we do see that sort of studio being really important to the generation of work, a thinking space, a making space, you've also got the technical areas, you've got all of the other aspects of GSA that come into play, the library and other areas, but also areas across the city, communities working beyond the art school, all become part of being within a studio construct.
We are developing a curriculum that's shared across the school that nurtures that the presentation of work, the critique, and I think that it's really important in the early years that it's done in that very supportive environment and a safe environment, so students can take risks, they can push the boundaries, and it's done within the safety net and support of the technical support.
It's also, I think, it's not just about the exposure of work to other people and discussion of work, it's the fact that that work is a work in progress, that there will be a point every year where people are showing finished work, either in exhibitions or degree show, etc. But the majority of our discussions are about work that's not complete. It's work that is half-formed, might be very nascent, it might be problematic, etc. And that's very different from other forms of education where the discussion is about the final thing, or the discussion is when something has been iterated, and you only see the end point.
The studio environment that we have is conducive to the production of work that isn't submitted for formal assessment.
But before, what is different or advantageous about an art school as opposed to more traditional forms of learning? And it's something in there about you're not producing work to task or work to previously established very strict criteria. You are working, okay, if I'm trying to explore this thing in this way, how am I going to do that? And it's not by writing an essay, where the format for the submission is previously determined. And I think university, as someone who went to university but works in an art school, I'm quite conscious of the difference and the freedom that students are granted, if you like, so the modes or the forms that their learning takes. Because they're not about writing an essay, and you know that it will always be about writing an essay or maybe doing a quick presentation. That actually the exploration will be based through making, and it'll be a process of making that takes place individually, also in groups, but also then relative to other peoples. And that sense, nobody at university really sits down and says, do you want to see the rough draft of my essay?
Actually, what students and staff are generating in studio and within studio practice is a body of work that goes beyond whatever the task in hand is or the things they've set themselves, which kind of edges out in lots of different places and has, if you like, the working involved, the rough cuts.
Well, one of the new programs we've developed recently is art writing, another one curatorial practice, but I was really keen to see what happened if you gave those students a studio. You know, so you're an art writing student, but you have a studio in which to develop those ideas.
But even though it's a written artefact, it doesn't have to conform to the prescribed expectations of what an essay is.
Yeah.
For that reason, it becomes open, it becomes exploratory, and subject to critique and evolution, because it is open-ended. And then that's one of the interesting things about the studio. It's a space. It's a set of practices, and those can be technical, as you were saying earlier on, Alistair. But it's also a set of practices by which you learn. Sally was talking about, and it's that combination of spatial, technical, kind of discursive or learning practices that it's hard to think of where else you find that opportunity to actually learn in such a sort of individually focused way, which is still quite collegiate, because you're still doing it with other people.
GSA is, I think, good at recognising that a studio-based education, as you describe it there, isn't limited to the GSA Garnet Hill real estate. Those practices of studio-based learning can be exported beyond the walls of the academy, as it were. And GSA has always had a history of that type of external engagement, in which or with which that style of studio learning can still take place.
When we visit our campus in Singapore and you go into the studios in Singapore, they have that sense of place, and it could be a studio in Glasgow because of the way in which the students work and they collaborate and they're making. It does very much have that sense of Glasgow School of Art studio-based activities.
Is that certain things that you've fostered there?
Yes, it's been fostered through the curriculum and the projects and the shared projects and the visiting staff, in both directions, and the students visiting Glasgow as well. But so it's quite interesting to see that in Singapore as well.
I think it's really interesting to hear that that's being fostered. I've unfortunately not yet been to the studios, but to see that feeling of place of Glasgow and the art school within Glasgow sort of being lifted and taken to Singapore and being important and having a value there. And I think I wanted to just add on to that, in a sense, the sort of value of Glasgow to the art school and the art school to Glasgow.
At the art school, given that half our student population is from somewhere else, the art school, the Academy on the Hill, is a place where other places turn up. So if you study at GSA, this is the case for most, if not all HEIs, but for us, the percentage is, large.
There are 21 different nationalities on the Masters in Communication Design, which I think is just a fantastic experience for students to rub up against those different...
For me, it's also not just where you come from, it's the difference in discipline. So I was saying earlier that when I studied at university, I studied computer science, and all my peers were computer scientists, and I was taught by computer scientists. So it's very one-dimensional, and here it's like a breath of fresh air, and you're collaborating with people with very different backgrounds, and you're able to do, I think, really innovative things that you wouldn't be able to do normally.
Art school, and this one in particular, I suppose, is more about learning than being trained, and that reflects the life that you would quite feasibly expect to have after graduation. Will you be gainfully employed and occupied? Almost certainly yes. The particular nature of that, we may or may not be able to say with a degree of certainty that we would have once done so, precisely because the changes that you're talking about, discipline, profession and larger society. But it's about equipping people with the capacity to learn now and also learn later that allows them to evolve, to adapt to the context that has not yet made itself clear.
the space of the art school is about constructing communities of learning or communities of practice in many ways. And I think that's one way I'd really like to look at the School of Art is School of Fine Art is a sort of community, but then the communities of learning are beyond the School of Fine Art, and actually those communities of learning are things that we set up, but they're also things that the students set up. And the students will quite often go on and, whilst learning, collaborate with others.
Yeah.
They'll find colleagues that might be in their halls of residence, it might be doing a project, it might be some other thing that they've met somebody, but that might lead them into their career or their future path.
Ability to understand and reflect on what you've learned and acquired, and then to understand how to put it to new use.
But one thing that I think has changed quite fundamentally in GSA is the idea that practice isn't something that happens once you've finished. It's not something once you get a degree you're allowed to do it. It's about, recognising that actual fact, it's about giving ourselves license. So students give themselves license also, that when they're here and they're working, they're practising. And many students, yes, it's not a rehearsal for it. It's about starting to work out what your practice means.